Summit in Brussels, the war and the peace explained. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane and our weekly wrap-up on UATV channel explaining hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. EU leaders discussed the latest developments in relation to Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and continued EU support for Ukraine. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, joined the EU leaders via video conference. What is the result of the meeting? Firstly, it has been reiterated again, Russia must stop its aggression and immediately, completely and unconditionally withdraw all of its military forces and proxies from the entire territory of Ukraine within its international recognized borders. International humanitarian law, including the treatment of prisoners of war, must be respected. Indeed, it is very important to say things aloud and call them what they really are. It has been reiterated for us in Ukraine, for you out there in the civilized world. Yes, the law must be humane and it must be respected. However, it goes without saying, no international law will ever be respected by Putin's Russia, since it is a dictatorship, and no dictatorship ever respects any law but the law of its dictator. And Russian nation is fine with that, since it is no nation but a population, and populism has successfully replaced truth in Russia. So the question is not what the summit in Brussels meant for Russia, but do all these fine words spoken there mean something tangible for us? What is it of most importance for Ukraine?
Time is important. Not only months and weeks, but also days are important. The faster we act together, the more lives we save. For more than a year of full-scale war, our cooperation with you has been steadily growing. Was there a destructive protection between our steps? Yes, there was. But still, we were pursuing a common goal. We were acting to stop Russian terror. Our defense cooperation, the successful passing through the winter without chaos and crisis, economic cooperation, 10 EU sanctions packages against Russia, European assistance to international justice in holding Russia war criminals accountable. All of this is the evidence that Europe knows how to defend its values and how the courage to stand up to terror.
It has been stated again that the European Council welcomes Ukraine's commitment and reform efforts and underlines the importance of Ukraine's EU accession process and in line with its earlier conclusions, notably those of June 2022. The European Union stands firmly and fully with Ukraine and will continue to provide strong political, economical, military, financial and humanitarian support to Ukraine and its people for as long as it takes. The European Union and member states are increasing their effort to help meet Ukraine's pressing military and defense needs. Taking into account the security and defense interests of all member states, the European Council welcomed the agreement in the Council to urgently deliver ground-to-ground and artillery ammunition to Ukraine and, if requested, missiles, including those joint procurement and the mobilization of appropriate funding, including through the European Peace Facility, aiming at providing 1 million rounds of artillery ammunition in a joint effort within the next 12 months, with the prejudice to the specific character of the security and defense policy of certain member states. The European Council condemned the continued military support for Russia's war of aggression provided by Iran and Belarus. It urges all countries not to provide material or other support of Russia's war of aggression. Again, it goes without saying that Belarus and Iran, same as Russia, are the outlaws of international community. And same as Russia, they will continue their criminal trade and activity. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine and its inhumane weaponization of most essential things like food, for example, have undermined global food security. In that context, the European Council have taken note of the extension of the UN Black Sea Grain Initiative. This initiative, the EU's Solidarity Alliance and the Ukraine Grain for Ukraine initiative are instrumental in bolstering global food security. It stresses the need to ensure the continued availability and affordability of agricultural products for the countries most in need. You can always argue that these summits and meetings are all just words. Well, 67 billion euro has already been made available for Ukraine and its people, and that is certainly not just words.
This meeting was important because basically it has consolidated an important decision which is a real step towards European defense. This is a decision that relates to ammunition. We want to be a fully committed player when it comes to providing support. We want to act as Europeans in terms of producing, manufacturing ammunition and delivering ammunition to Ukraine.
Let us not forget that even these hard days, the European Union is continuously building a robust and future-proof economy that secures long-term prosperity. This requires many things, but first, no war in Europe condition. That means the European Union will continue to provide all relevant support to the Republic of Moldova to strengthen the country's resilience, security, stability and economy and help it on its path to EU accession. And you can't miss the dragon, of course. China also became a theme of the day, with a succession of leaders raising the alarm about China's ostentatious backing for Vladimir Putin this week. Leaders of the world warned that Europe could not stand by while Beijing and Moscow cement an alliance that risks tipping the world into deeper crisis. Not only war was on the agenda. Friday's meeting was dedicated to the economy. The second day of the summit is called Euro Summit. This time it was on to Europe's mostly shared currency, the euro. Day 2 has brought together the 19 countries using the euro. After high-profile bank failures in the US and Switzerland, Europeans are wondering whether they need to snatch their money from the bank. A lot of talking again, and again it may sound like nothing but talking. However, take a look back. Take a look at all this prosperity and safety Europe is enjoying even now. This was also just words back then, initially. So the hard thing explained in easy terms here is just one. Europe really is united. It has a bunch of problems, but then again, who doesn't? This way or the other, Europe these days looks strong and united and awake enough to meet and overcome all the challenges of any origin, whether of economy or war. It really was a lesson of diplomacy for the Western world leaders from their Asian counterparts, or rivals, if you like. These weak leaders of Japan and China ventured to the capitals of two countries in the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. Japan's Prime Minister came to Kiev and the leader of Chinese Communist Party, Xi Jinping, to the Kremlin, of course. Kishida's visit is a domestic must, since Kishida was the only big politician who hasn't yet visited Ukraine and was under constant pressure from his own Liberal Democratic Party. Since he is about to preside the G7 soon, he ought to visit Ukraine and shake hands with Volodymyr Zelenskyy. A must, yes, nevertheless, a very successful, for the both parties, must. Chinese leader Xi Jinping in turn left Moscow after meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin about Beijing's peace proposal, which the West has rejected as a non-starter. No progress towards peace was reported. Well, hard thing in easy terms, to understand China means to understand that it is an autocratic, rigid, communist-based, capital-oriented dictature. That means Xi Jinping, just as Putin dreams of power and domination in the region. Unlike Putin, however, China has means to achieve the goal, and its leader has intellect to understand that it's not worth it. The country is way too vast, too powerful and prosperous if embedded into US and EU economies, and will grow more if things are just left as they are. And a great deal China's growth will be ensured on Russia's account, because Putin just lacks it both. Nor has he means to satisfy his greed for power, nor obviously has he the intellect to abstain from pursuing the illusion of dominance. Even if at this point it still wasn't clear to anyone, Putin does not want peace in Ukraine. He wants a piece of it.
Just one day after Russia called for peace, Russia is attacking Ukrainian homes as part of its brutal war. What Russia is doing is horrific, and we are committed to continuing to help Ukraine defend itself against this Russian aggression. Adrian Watson, U.S. National Security Council spokesperson.
Russia has stepped up its missile and drone attacks against Ukraine on Wednesday, killing civilians in a violent follow-up to dueling high-level diplomatic missions aimed at bringing peace after 13 months of war. Wednesday this week, a drone attack damaged a high school and 2 dormitories in the city of Ryshiv, south of the Ukrainian capital. 9 people were killed at 3 o'clock at night, in the middle of their sleep, more than 500 kilometers from the front line, because of the unreasonable, brutal shelling. These were attacks of bestial savagery, is called by Volodymyr Zelenskyy. Norwegian journalist Morten Risberg, who visited Mariupol in December, told the BBC he saw large-scale rebuilding and restoration amid destruction everywhere you looked. They're changing street names and they're painting over Ukrainian colors with Russian colors and they're putting Russian flags everywhere. Most of the remaining civilians in the city were just focusing on surviving, he said. Well, that is Russia, where survival is a national idea. This is what they bring to the outer world as well when they can. Survival. Living? No. Too complicated. For living, you need a lot of things like economy, science, medicine, social security. No. And just by the way, it is easy. Survival. You either survive or not. Very Russian way. Also, China has declared a map war on Russia. Beijing has released maps showing Russian cities with Chinese names. The Qing dynasty gave up these lands to the Russian Empire more than 100 years ago. Now China wants them back. What is it? Testing the limits of the no-limits partnership? Wang Yi, the Chinese Politburo member in charge of foreign affairs, was in Moscow this week saying that the friendship between Russia and China is as solid as a rock. Well, anyone who has studied at least some history is well aware the history of Russian-Chinese relations is nothing else but a guidebook of deceitful deceptions. And that means only one thing: more glory to Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelenskyy has returned to the front line near Bakhmut, where fighting has raged for months. The devastated city has long been a focal point of the war as Russian forces try to revive their military campaign in the east, with no success though. President Zelenskyy has visited the eastern front line, where Ukrainian forces held back Russia for more than 7 months. Footage released by the president's office showed him in an old industrial warehouse giving medals to battle-weary soldiers. "I'm honored to be here today," he told servicemen, "in the east of our country, in Donbass, and to award our heroes, to thank you, to shake your hands." UK military intelligence said on Wednesday that a Ukrainian counterattack to the west of Bakhmut was likely to relieve pressure on the main supply route to the city, and that Russia's attack on the city could be losing the limited momentum it had. However, putting aside the pseudo-military analysis, we are capable of sitting in our comfortable chairs behind the monitors and not trenches, and charging our notebooks and not weapons. We must admit only one thing: Zelenskyy was at the very front line again. While Putin was in Mariupol, many experts call the videos and photos of Putin's trip staged, and the working visit itself a fiction. Moreover, some are convinced that it was not Putin himself who was actually in Mariupol, but his double. But the hard thing in easy term, it just doesn't matter. Putin or his copy-paste, whatever. Because what is the difference between Zelenskyy's trip to the front and Putin's trip to Mariupol? I won't be explaining it to you here. For those who need an explanation, I can't help you. And really, I don't think you can be helped at all. How can you even compare the trip of a real president of a real country and a usurper representing the aggressor? How can you compare Zelenskyy going up the hill of everything? Life, power, world acknowledgement, and Putin, who's desperately clinging to the last steps on his way down on the stairs of reality to the inevitable collapse? How and in what units to measure the gap between a man who awards medals to his soldiers defending his country and an international criminal at large? Yes, both these two ventured at trips. However, one is in his own country. The other one does his worst to prove it's his. The one is young and ambitious, the other one is outdated and insatiably greedy. One requires nothing but a just peace, the other one is all about justification of the war. How come even Zelenskyy's enemies recognize the success of the foreign and domestic policy, and even Putin's friends prefer to remain silent or speak with old rehearsed Soviet communist slogans like "We will win, follow our leader, down with the Nazi Kiev regime," led by a Jewish person, but who cares, right? I mean, Russian propaganda these days is adorable, without having any single true or even true-like justification for continuing Russia's war of aggression, but Putin's shattered ego, it's forced to use the wildest mixture of the most morbid, ill nonsense you can even imagine. Magnified by artificial psychotic presenters, it is designed and created with only one goal: to make a person on the other side of the screen not to think about how is it even possible to go forward to a bright future while moving back to the darkest past. One last stress on this theme, so to remind you about what we in Ukraine are actually fighting against. It was day 32 of the war. This is Russian Deputy Minister of Defense Alexander Fomin presenting a medal to a Russian corporal wounded in the war in Ukraine and wished a soldier whose leg was torn off to get back on his feet. Whatever it is, unbelievable inattention, outright stupidity, or inhumane lack of compassion, it's all you ever needed to know about Putin's Russia. That's all, folks. It was Henry Keane on UATV channel doing my best this week in breaking hard things into easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Stay safe and tuned for more by my colleague Paul Stelmach next week. See you soon.